The wine glass didn't break when it hit the floor. It just rolled twice and settled near the heel of her stupidly expensive stiletto. Everyone gasped like I'd fired a gun. But she laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a nervous one. A loud, teeth-baring, look what I just did laugh. Like she'd won some game I didn't know we were playing. That's when I realized I was the only one at that party who didn't know the rules. Or the ending. Because the ending was me walking out without saying goodbye. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is she planned it. Let's rewind exactly 10 minutes. She was standing by the piano, holding court like she always did, cocktail in one hand, the other hand resting lightly on some guy's shoulder. Not touching, just enough to send a signal. She had a way of looking at men that made them feel like the sun had finally noticed them. I used to love that look when it was mine. Tonight, it wasn't. Someone handed her a mic. Some smug-looking junior executive yelled, "Speech," and the whole room started clapping like trained seals. She raised her glass, tilted her head. Then she winked, but not at me, at him. And then it started. I just want to thank everyone for being here and for putting up with me during my I swear I'm fine breakdowns over analytics reports. And of course, I have to thank my fiancé, wherever he's hiding. People chuckled. I raised my hand from the back. Ah, there he is. The man, the myth, the future trophy husband. Laughter. That hollow, echoey laughter that makes your lungs feel like they're filled with concrete. Really though, you're the best. You're so patient with me. Especially when I come home and talk for 45 minutes about work and you just listen. Silently. Almost like you're not even there at all. Bigger laughter. I smiled, like a complete idiot. Then she dropped it. But seriously, behind every strong woman is a man just vibing, folding laundry, and making sure the Wi-Fi bill is paid. That's when the glass slipped from my hand. That's when the wine hit the floor. That's when I knew. She wasn't just performing. She was making sure I'd never forget this night. And neither would anyone else. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I walked to the bar, took the ring out of my jacket, and placed it on the napkin next to the bartender. I whispered, "Could you give this to her?" He nodded, wide-eyed. And I left. I walked past stunned faces, past whispers, past the man she winked at, who suddenly looked like he didn't want to be there anymore. Out the door. Into the night. No yelling. No drama. No goodbye. Just silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest sound in the room. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, still fully dressed, with a splitting headache and a half-eaten granola bar stuck to my sweater. My phone had 11 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and at least 30 text messages, all from her. I didn't listen to a single one. I just stared at the ceiling, letting the weight of last night settle in. The quiet after a storm always feels strange. You expect some kind of dramatic thunderclap or police sirens, but no. Just a hangover, a stiff neck, and a bitter realization. I had become a character in my own personal tragedy, and worst of all, I didn't even get the lead role. I was background noise in her victory speech. That's when the phone rang again, but this time, it was an unknown number. I answered without thinking, my voice cracked from dryness and disappointment. "Hello. Hey, is this Ellison?" The voice said cautiously. It was a guy? Mid-20s, maybe. Nervous. A little awkward. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Miles. I was the bartender at the party last night. Sorry to call out of nowhere, man, but I think you should know something." My stomach flipped. He hesitated, then went on. "I gave her the ring, like you asked." She looked shocked for about 5 seconds. Then she just shrugged, took it, slid it into her purse, and walked back to the guy in the gray suit. Tall dude. Slick hair. Yeah, she went right up to him, grabbed him by the tie, whispered something, and then they left. Together. I didn't say anything. She didn't cry, bro. She didn't run after you. It was like she knew you'd leave. Like she wanted it. I just thought. I don't know. You deserve to know. I thanked him, barely holding my voice steady. He apologized again, said he hoped I was all right, and hung up. I sat there on the floor, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of something I already knew deep down. This wasn't betrayal. It was strategy. She knew I'd bring the ring. She knew I'd crack if pushed hard enough in front of her power crowd. That speech? It wasn't spontaneous. That wink to the guy in the gray suit? That wasn't innocent flirting. It was a setup, and I had walked right into it like the clueless fool I was. You ever realize too late that someone's been unbuilding your relationship one sarcastic comment at a time? That was Lydia. She didn't cheat in the traditional sense. Oh no, that would have been too basic for her. She orchestrated her exit like a corporate acquisition, clean, quiet, public-facing, with a spin she could use later. I wasn't the man who left her. I was the man who overreacted at her party, the unstable fiancé who couldn't handle her success, the poor guy who thought love was enough. I could already hear it in her voice when I replayed those voicemails later. Can we talk like adults? You embarrassed yourself more than me. I hope you know how dramatic that looked. But the one that stuck out the most, the one that keeps looping in my brain, was the message that came at exactly 3:07 a.m. Her voice was slower, a little slurred, but still sharp. Always sharp. Ellison, you really made it easy for me, you know? Thanks for making me the sympathetic one. Click. And that's when I finally allowed the anger to crawl out of its hiding place. Because now, this wasn't heartbreak. It was war. She wanted to humiliate me? She wanted to spin a narrative? Fine. But she underestimated one thing. I may be sensitive. I may alphabetize the spice rack. I may write poetry no one reads. But I remember everything. And I know things about her she prays never see daylight. And the first chapter? It starts with what happened before the party. Because the man in the gray suit? He wasn't just a coworker. He was the reason we had postponed our wedding twice. She just didn't know I knew that. It had been a Tuesday. Rainy. Not the cinematic kind, either. Just the kind that made the sidewalks smell like dirty coins and made your clothes stick to you in all the wrong places. I remember it because I was doing laundry, which in our apartment meant climbing 4 floors with a laundry basket that was older than our relationship, avoiding the weird guy on the 3rd floor who always asked if I wanted to collaborate on music. Lydia had come home late again, said there was a last-minute brand alignment dinner with some new consultant. Her lipstick was darker than usual, her perfume stronger, her heels louder. I was folding towels when she dropped her coat on the back of the chair like she always did. Lazy, careless, like she expected me to deal with it. I reached to hang it up because, of course I did. Because I was raised by a woman who told me love is in the small things. That's when I felt something in the pocket. A receipt. Folded twice. Warm, like it had just been stuffed in. At first I didn't even care. I wasn't looking for anything. But when I opened it, something about it felt off. Dinner for 2. Some high-end Japanese place downtown. 2 tasting menus. 2 cocktails. A dessert labeled shared. Over $200 total. Time stamped 8:47 p.m. The same night she told me she was eating alone at her desk and didn't want to be bothered by delivery. I remember staring at that little slip of paper, thinking, maybe she took a client out? Maybe her team went with her? Maybe I'm making something out of nothing. But you know what no one ever talks about? How small betrayal feels at first. How quiet. It doesn't arrive as some dramatic moment with lipstick on a collar or some stranger's shirt on the floor. It shows up in whispers, like a crumpled receipt in a coat pocket. I didn't confront her. Instead, I slid the receipt back where I found it, like I hadn't seen it at all. I smiled when she kissed my forehead. I asked her about her day. I made us tea. Because deep down, I didn't want to know the truth. Not yet. I wasn't ready to destroy my own reality. Looking back, that night was the beginning of the end. Not the party. Not the speech. Not the voicemail. That Tuesday. That stupid, soggy Tuesday, when I chose to protect her lie rather than defend my dignity. I told myself she deserved the benefit of the doubt. That I wasn't the kind of guy who jumped to conclusions. That relationships were built on trust, even when things didn't line up perfectly. But now I see what she saw in that moment. A man too passive to stand up for himself. A man she could slowly deconstruct with smiles and sarcasm until nothing was left but a blank space she could rewrite. And she was already rewriting. 2 days after that receipt, I noticed she'd started putting a passcode on her phone. Not subtle about it either. Turning away, tapping fast, locking it twice if I so much as walked past the kitchen. She never did that before. She used to hand me her phone to DJ while she drove. Now, it was an extension of her spine, locked, guarded, and permanently glued to her palm. She also stopped talking about the wedding. Said she was overwhelmed with work, and maybe we needed to pause planning until Q4. Q4. Like our marriage was a fiscal strategy. I told myself it was stress, that she just needed space. But the truth? She was clearing the runway, and I was the cargo she was preparing to dump. You might be wondering why I stayed. Why I didn't ask about the dinner receipt. Why I didn't blow up when she locked me out of her phone. Why I didn't walk away long before that rooftop speech. Because I loved her. And because part of me was terrified she'd say what I already suspected. That she'd confirm the story I was writing in my head. A story where I wasn't enough. Where I was the anchor and she needed wings. Where I was just the guy she met before she figured out who she really wanted to be. But now I'm rewriting the story. Because I've finally accepted what I refused to see. Lydia didn't fall out of love with me. She outgrew the lie she told herself about loving a man like me in the first place. And now that lie is unraveling. One memory at a time. There's something about hindsight that feels like betrayal twice over. Once from the person who hurt you, and again from yourself, for not seeing it coming. But it's worse when you realize the man she chose instead, the one she laughed with after her little comedy routine at the party, wasn't a stranger at all. He had a name I remembered. A face I'd shaken hands with. A voice I'd heard in my living room, complimenting my bookshelf and pretending to admire the record player she bought me for my birthday. His name was Andrew. Not Andy. Not Drew. Just Andrew. Clean-shaven, high cheekboned, perfect haircut kind of guy. The kind you feel insecure around without knowing exactly why. I first met him at a holiday event Lydia hosted last year. Said he was a consultant, whatever that meant. He worked with her firm on some long-term brand overhaul project. Or maybe it was analytics. Or something else vague and polished. What I remember most about him wasn't what he said. It was how he looked at her when he thought I wasn't watching. Too long. Too warm. I remember she introduced us by saying, "This is Andrew. He gets me." It was one of those comments you're supposed to laugh at. So I laughed. Like a good little clown in my own circus. At the time, I chalked up the awkwardness to corporate closeness. You know, that faux intimacy people in high-level offices develop. Long hours, shared jargon, a bond built out of espresso shots and Google Docs. I convinced myself I was paranoid. Jealous. I told myself I was being insecure because I didn't wear suits to work and my office was a laptop in a coffee shop. But now, I see it clearly. That wasn't office banter. That was chemistry. And I walked away from that party thinking I was just the plus one. The guy behind the genius. The quiet support beam she leaned on. I didn't realize I was the placeholder. The dots started connecting fast after the bartender's call. I went through her LinkedIn connections, something I hadn't done in years, and there he was. Andrew B., strategic brand consultant. NYU alum. Fluent in Mandarin and sarcasm. Same smug photo. Same dead eyes. A few weeks before the party, he'd posted a picture of a rooftop view in the same neighborhood where the event took place. No people in it. Just the caption, "Big things. Big moves." The comments were filled with handshakes, flames, and congratulations from people in suits. But one comment stood out. From Lydia. Just a single word. Proud. Not congrats. Not well-deserved. Proud. You don't say that to a colleague. You say that to someone you're invested in. Someone you're tied to emotionally. Someone you're choosing. And suddenly, I remembered something else, something that, at the time, barely registered. 3 months ago, Lydia left her phone on the counter while she was in the shower. A rare moment of carelessness. A text banner lit up while I was grabbing water. It was a nickname I didn't recognize. AB. Message preview. Dinner same place? I'll book. Can't wait. When I mentioned it later, casually, she said it was her boss asking about client dinners. I believed her. No, I wanted to believe her. Because believing her meant not confronting the reality I wasn't ready to face. I still had his business card. From the Christmas party. Buried in the junk drawer with batteries, expired coupons, and IKEA screws that fit nothing. I found it. I held it. I stared at his phone number, his email, his LinkedIn handle, all printed in raised glossy text, like he was a damn product. And I called him. Don't ask me why. Don't ask what I thought would happen. Maybe I wanted him to deny it. Maybe I wanted to hear it from the source. Maybe I just wanted to hear his voice crack, just once. He answered on the third ring. Hello? I didn't say my name. Just asked, are you still seeing her? He was silent for a second too long. Then he said, I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. Not no. Not who. Just that. I laughed. It came out broken, like something had snapped in my throat. You already are involved, Andrew. Click. I blocked the number. That night, Lydia came home acting normal. Too normal. She asked what I wanted for dinner. Told me about a coworker's dog. Asked if I wanted to rewatch that dumb crime documentary we'd started 2 weeks ago. I nodded. I played along. But I didn't look at her the same. Because now, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. And soon, so would she. Because I had a plan. Not revenge. Not theatrics. Something quieter. Slower. The kind of ending she would never see coming. I didn't confront her. That would have been too easy. Too expected. Lydia knew how to navigate confrontation. She'd spin it, deflect it, gaslight her way back into moral superiority before I even finished my first sentence. She was an expert at twisting tone into guilt and silence into accusation. I'd been through that dance before, and I wasn't stepping onto that floor again. So instead, I did something different. I started testing the waters. Small things, at first. Passive inconsistencies. I left her engagement ring in the medicine cabinet one morning instead of in its velvet box on the dresser. She didn't notice. Or pretended not to. I saved a photo of her and Andrew from a company gala to the desktop of our shared laptop. Not hidden, not buried in a folder, just right there next to her work documents. She opened the laptop twice that week, looked directly at the screen both times. Not a word. I stopped doing her laundry. I didn't fold her sweaters the way she liked, didn't hang her silk blouses, didn't separate colors from whites. She never asked why, not even once. I think, by that point, she was hoping I'd start detaching, that it would make the split easier, cleaner, more digestible for her image. The biggest clue I left, though, was the one I didn't mean to. I stopped saying, "I love you." It was the kind of phrase that had become routine between us, said over morning coffee, mumbled during rushed exits, half-whispered through phone calls when one of us was boarding a flight. But when I stopped saying it, she didn't even flinch, didn't pause, didn't ask if something was wrong. She just let it disappear into the space between us, like a coat she was glad to take off. That was the moment I knew. She'd already moved on. Emotionally, mentally, maybe even logistically. I wasn't her fiancé anymore. I was a placeholder she hadn't removed yet. And worse, she was just waiting for me to do it for her. Still, I wasn't ready to explode. I wanted her to look me in the eye and say it. To admit it. I wanted her to walk into the trap of her own making. To feel the cold weight of honesty instead of hiding behind performance and polish. So I started writing things down. Everything. Every slip. Every inconsistency. Every red flag I'd ignored over the past 6 months. The forgotten anniversaries. The closed-door Zoom calls. The 2-hour gym trips she came back from with perfect eyeliner. I made a list. Not because I needed proof, no. I just needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I had gaslight myself for so long in that relationship. Told myself love meant patience. That compromise meant swallowing discomfort. That believing her over my gut made me a good partner. But I wasn't a partner anymore. I was an inconvenience. And nothing proves that more than this. She had started calling me buddy. 3 times in a week. Not in affection. Not in jest. In that dismissive, corporate tone she used with interns. Thanks, buddy. You're the best, buddy. Appreciate it, buddy. Every time she said it, I felt like I was disappearing in front of her. Like she was slowly erasing me with every word, replacing me with some emotionally neutered version of myself who would keep paying the bills, keep playing house, keep wearing the damn ring, and keep pretending not to notice she was slipping out the back door. But I wasn't pretending anymore. The last thing I did that week was the boldest. I changed my phone's lock screen. It used to be a photo of us from a beach trip in Charleston, the one she made me post with the caption, "Lucky me ring." You couldn't even tell we were holding hands. She'd cropped it square for aesthetic. Now, I replaced it with a quote. Just white text on a black background. The scariest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. I watched her reaction when I put the phone face up on the kitchen counter that night. She didn't say a word, didn't ask, didn't flinch. She just poured herself a glass of wine, opened her laptop, and asked if I'd taken out the trash. And that's when I knew the performance was almost over. The only question left was whether she'd choose to end the show herself, or if I'd have to do it for her. It was a Wednesday, midweek, nothing special. The kind of day where everything feels routine enough to let your guard down, which is exactly what she was counting on. Lydia told me she'd be working late again. Big pitch, new client, high-pressure deliverables. I nodded, as usual, said good luck, and gave her the same empty smile I'd been giving her for the last 2 weeks. But this time, I didn't stay home. I waited until I heard the front door close, gave it 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed her. I wasn't proud of it. I didn't feel like some suave detective uncovering a web of lies. I felt pathetic, stupid, like a man who still needed proof of what he already knew. But there was something inside me that needed to see it. To have the image burned into my brain so I could stop fantasizing that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. I tailed her car from 2 lengths back. She had no idea. She never once looked in the mirror, never once hesitated at a light. She drove with the confidence of someone who believed no one would ever question her. And why would they? She had built an entire identity on being the composed one, the one in control, the one who never made mistakes. She didn't go to her office. She didn't go to a client's office, either. She pulled into a small, private parking lot behind an old brick building near the edge of the city, a boutique hotel. Not one of those chain places with conference rooms and stale coffee. No, this was the kind of place you go when you want privacy, where the desk staff don't ask questions, where reservations are made under fake names, where people don't stay the night, just long enough. I parked on the opposite side of the street. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. Because 2 minutes later, he pulled in. Andrew, still dressed like a cover model for men who think they're better than you. He got out of his car with a leather duffel and didn't even bother checking his surroundings. That was the part that made my stomach turn the most, the casualness of it, the ease. This wasn't an affair filled with guilt and secrecy. This was routine. Lydia stepped out of her car just as he reached her. She didn't look nervous. She didn't glance around or hurry. She smiled. She reached for his face with one hand and kissed him the way she hadn't kissed me in months. Slow, familiar, intimate. And then, I swear this is true, they both laughed. She said something, he shook his head, and they walked inside together like they'd done it 100 times before. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel. I just sat there, completely numb, watching the revolving door spin behind them. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't feel a thing. It was over. Not just the relationship. Not just the trust. Everything. The years. The planning. The apartment filled with furniture we picked out together. The wedding invites waiting in a folder on my desktop. The dress she claimed not to have bought yet. The ring I still hadn't returned. She had already replaced me. Emotionally. Physically. Entirely. And what shattered me more than anything else was this. I don't think she even felt bad. I think, in her mind, I deserved it. For not being ambitious enough. For not being exciting enough. For not challenging her. For being the guy who made sure the fridge had oat milk and who ironed her blouses before client calls. I had become background noise in her life. Tolerable until something better came along. And something better, apparently, was Andrew. I stayed there for almost an hour. I didn't follow them inside. I didn't take photos or burst in to make a scene. That wasn't the point anymore. I wasn't trying to catch her. I was letting her go. I drove home slowly. Every red light felt like a funeral march. When I got back to the apartment, it was still filled with her smell, lavender, cedarwood, that stupid $90 candle she insisted on lighting every night. I looked at her desk, her half-full wine glass, the cardigan she left on the back of the couch, and I felt like I had broken into someone else's life. Like none of this was mine anymore. So I started packing. Not everything. Not yet. Just what mattered. The personal things. The irreplaceables. Because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to wait for her to end this. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of crafting the perfect breakup story where she was the one who decided we'd grown apart. No. She wanted me out of the picture. She was about to find out what that looked like. It was nearly midnight when she came back. I had already been gone for 3 hours. I didn't leave a note on the door. I didn't send a text. There was no final confrontation. That would have made it about her again. And she didn't deserve a scene. She deserved silence. Silence that would echo through every inch of that apartment and make her wonder, for the first time in her life, if she miscalculated. I had packed everything I cared about. Clothes, journals, the box of letters my mother wrote me before she passed, my laptop, and the last photograph we ever took together. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I didn't want her to turn it into something aesthetic for Instagram later. I didn't trash the place. I didn't key her car or destroy her heels or smash our framed trip photos. No, that would have made it too easy for her to play the victim. Lydia was the kind of woman who could turn any act of anger against you and make herself the martyr in front of her friends. I wasn't giving her that ammunition. Instead, I left something else. On the kitchen table, under the dim glow of the pendant light she insisted we buy from some overpriced Danish website, I arranged a few simple items. First, the engagement ring, placed neatly in its velvet box, open, facing the front door. Next to it, the printed hotel receipt. I had driven back earlier that evening and asked the front desk for a copy, pretending to be Andrew. The clerk didn't blink. I didn't even need to show ID. Just smiled and said, "My boss lost his copy." He handed it over without hesitation. Beside that, I left one of my journals. Not the one with poems or thoughts. No, this one was different. It was the list. The master list I had compiled for weeks now. Pages and pages of observations. The things she said. The things she didn't. The nights she worked late. The shift in her body language. The lies she told with such polished ease. Every page written in clean, small handwriting, with timestamps, locations, even screenshots printed and taped between the pages. Not to accuse her, not to confront her, just to make sure that, if she ever dared to gaslight me again, even in her own mind, there would be evidence. And finally, the note. Not a dramatic letter. Just 6 words, handwritten in black ink on white printer paper. "You don't get to rewrite this." I didn't sign it. She'd know. I heard from our upstairs neighbor later that she came home humming. High heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor as she let herself in. They said she turned on music, poured herself a glass of wine, probably still on that post-Andrew high, probably thinking she'd pulled it off one more time. She didn't know I had seen her. She didn't know I had followed her. She didn't know the end had already happened hours earlier. Apparently, she didn't make it through the whole glass of wine. The music stopped abruptly. Then silence. A full 10 minutes of it, according to our neighbor. No movement. No footsteps. Nothing. Just silence. Then something fell. Something heavy. Maybe the journal. Maybe the wine glass. Then pacing. Doors opening. Cabinets slamming. She was probably looking for something. An explanation, a trail of breadcrumbs to follow. Some hope that this was just another one of my emotional episodes she could fix with a few well-timed tears and fake apologies. But there was nothing left to find. I had scrubbed everything that was mine from the space. The dresser drawers were empty. The toothbrush gone. The shared Spotify account logged out. My books. My sweaters. My side of the bed, stripped bare. And I imagine, when it all finally sank in, when she saw the ring and the receipt and the journal, it wasn't rage that hit her first. It was panic, because Lydia never planned for me to leave. She had choreographed the collapse perfectly in her head. She'd act wounded, disappointed, mature. She'd frame it to her friends as a peaceful separation, the end of something that just wasn't working. And eventually, when it was convenient, she'd reveal the new relationship, well-timed, tasteful, spun as something unexpected but healing. But now, that timeline was gone, because I had taken the story from her and left only the truth. I didn't hear from her for 2 days. Not a text, not a call, not a passive-aggressive email or a vague, "hope you're okay" message. On the 3rd day, I received a voice memo. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I deleted it immediately. Because that's what you do with ghosts when you're finally ready to stop living in a haunted house. It had been 21 days since I walked out. 3 weeks without her voice in my ear. Without her clothes draped across the chair. Without her half-finished coffee mugs littering the counter, or her calendar reminders echoing through the apartment like corporate ghosts. 3 weeks of silence, of stillness, of adjusting to a kind of emptiness that, to my surprise, wasn't painful. It was peaceful. I rented a small place across town. Month to month, no long-term commitment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The walls were plain, the mattress sat on the floor, and the kitchen had just enough space for one. But every time I unlocked that door, I didn't feel dread. I didn't brace for a sigh, a sarcastic jab, a performance. I walked in, set my keys down, and exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. In that time, I began remembering who I was before Lydia started slowly erasing me. I started writing again, not out of obligation, not because I had to meet a deadline, but because I wanted to hear my own thoughts. I started reading at night without feeling guilty for not being productive. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months. People she quietly nudged me away from. The ones she said were too negative, or too immature, or holding me back. And I laughed. God, I hadn't laughed like that in so long. Real, chest-deep laughter that didn't come with side glances or silent judgment. I was healing. And then, of course, she came back. Not physically, not with flowers or tears. Lydia was too composed for that. Instead, she emailed me. The subject line was just my name. The body of the message was everything I expected it to be. Carefully worded, calculated, full of that signature tone she used when she wanted to sound vulnerable without admitting any real fault. She said she missed what we had, that she regretted how things ended, that life felt quieter now, and she was reflecting a lot. And then, of course, I wish we could talk, not to fix things, just to understand each other. Understand each other. A poetic little way of asking if the door was still open. I stared at the message for a while, not out of confusion or temptation, but because a few months ago, even a sentence like that would have wrecked me, would have pulled me back in, would have made me question everything all over again. But not now, because now I understood everything I needed to. So I didn't reply. I archived the email. And then I did something even more powerful. I didn't think about it again. The truth is, Lydia never broke me. She bent me. She silenced parts of me. She turned me into a version of myself I barely recognized. But in the end, I walked away. And there's something quietly beautiful about that. Because there's no revenge like indifference. No closure like peace. No power like reclaiming your own narrative. 2 nights ago, I stood on the rooftop of my new building. It's nothing fancy. A few chairs, a loose string of lights, some potted plants someone keeps forgetting to water. But the view? It's clean and wide and honest. No lies in the skyline. I watched the city breathe under the stars and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was proud of myself. Not for staying. For leaving. Not for fighting. For letting go. And most of all, for finally understanding that the version of love where you shrink to fit someone else's comfort, that's not love. That's disappearance. And I'm done disappearing.